Thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team, every single day. Hello, I'm Stephen Willis, host of the Locked On Ole Miss podcast. I'm joined by Daylan Flowers. And, this is either the slowest or the second slowest day of the sports year, and the day after the Super Bowl or the day after the All-Star game. And so this episode will be a little bit different. I'm wearing my spring training Detroit Tigers hat. I'm getting ready for baseball to get kicked off. Pitchers and catchers report Wednesday. But I guess we need to start off by going backwards a little bit. And I was like, what are your big takeaways from Super Bowl 58? Not necessarily the game, but what are your big takeaways from that?
I thought it was a few different takeaways. I thought just kind of the defenses and how they played in the game was a big resemblance to how I feel like defenses in the league were played a lot this year, and a lot of just nickel formations I saw from both teams a lot last night. And that's something that I saw a lot from a lot of teams this year. And I'm wondering that's maybe more of a comfortable thing defensive coordinators in the league are going to. So that was a big takeaway for me. And I think as well, I would love to see how the 49ers would have played if things like Dre Greenlaw didn't get hurt. And I know some people might not think of that as a big deal, and I may be making it a big deal, but I think Dre Greenlaw was a really key part of the 49ers defense in terms of playing back in coverage. He's been a really good run stopper all year. I would have loved to see maybe if he could have spied Patrick Mahomes a lot more in that late game situation to stop him from running and get a lot of those first downs he did late in the game. So I would love to see in my mind what that is. I know sometimes I don't like to play the who or what kind of game, but I would just love to think what kind of game that would have been for the both teams, honestly, just to see how the Chiefs would have kind of matched up to kind of overcome Dre Greenlaw in that position if he was out there. And also a big takeaway for me is, where is media coverage going? And when I say that, we look at how things were covered after the game, how things were covered in the tense of the game as well, and just how things are talked about. I'm still learning in this journalism world, but there were a lot of things that just caught my eye, honestly. And, there were things that I personally thought could have been done better. And I won't, really get into specifics, but there's just a lot of things that I thought could have done better, were great as well. And I just love learning about small things like that. And I guess I will say one thing, like just Tony Romo, like at that last play, and him just, I don't know, kind of carrying on just a little bit more in that moment instead of kind of grazing, this is the world champions now. And he just kind of focused on Patrick Mahomes, I guess, kind of just, I don't know, rubbed me the weird way. And so I would love to see how we could talk about that more, I guess, is in the media. So that was some of my takeaways from the game. It was a weird game, but it was a fun one at the end. And congrats to the Chiefs and all Chiefs fans around the world.
Yep. After all of that, two special teams play is the reason Kansas City is the champion. Two special teams play.
Yeah. And it's funny, though, one of the 49ers play where he, it hit his teammate, and then he tried to get it and they didn't recover it. I didn't even realize that it hit the guy's foot until they showed the replay. But also as well, that's why they yell out to one another so you can get out the way. And I don't know if he didn't hear him or what the situation was. So I would love to kind of maybe get a little bit more in depth about that situation as well.
Yeah, the returner should have just fallen on the ball instead of trying to run with it. That in that situation, it's got to be a better safe than sorry type situation.
Yeah, and I remember a lot growing up because I grew up with the Hogs, and I remember this guy named Joe Adams, man. He was one of the best punt returners that I had ever remember in my lifetime. And I remember so much of commentators and even hearing coaches from press conference talk about how to work on things like that and jumping on the ball, the ways you jump on the ball as well, so you don't lose it and stuff like that. So it's interesting to see how much they work on those things in practices all season, even leading up to the Super Bowl. And I think, those small things are maybe forgotten, in a couple of years. And I also would just like to say how important those small things are, man, because if the 49ers recover that punt, we may be talking about a different Super Bowl champion here today. So it's small.
It makes the extra point. We're talking about a different Super Bowl.
So it's sometimes, I think feel like things like that may be forgotten in the long run, but those are really huge things that really could change the landscape of the thing, because now we're talking about, can the Chiefs go win the three-peat, but if they make that extra point, they recover that punt, then we're in a completely different situation.
So, changing the subject to something probably Ole Miss fans want to talk about a little bit more, but we'll talk about Caleb Odom, who is at Alabama. And those who do not know, Ryan Grubb, the offensive coordinator, I'm going to say offensive coordinator at Alabama, is going to the Seattle Seahawks. He's taking the offensive line coach with him. And the Seattle Times came out and said that the reason that they didn't announce it until they did is because they were waiting on the 30-day transfer window to close, which means they were intentionally trying to deceive the athletes. And Caleb Odom went to Alabama. He signed with Nick Saban. He got recruited by Joe Cox. He has nobody there. Ryan Grubb and his work with wide receivers was enough for him to give it a try. He's gone now. You have to think that Caleb Odom is at least going to be looking out the door. And I think he would have a slam dunk waiver for immediate playing time too, as well.
Yeah, and I've never really gotten to talk too much about Caleb Odom on the show before, but if you follow me on Twitter, you've seen me talk about this kid a lot. And I have just really been in rave of this kid, and he was really high on Ole Miss's list as a recruit coming out of high school. Lane visited him a lot in high school, and I truly believe that he was really close to committing to this school. And I still think we have a good chance of getting him. The kid, his size is outstanding. He's really fast for his size as well. Has some of the best hands I've seen from a high school tight end in a very long time as well. I'm very just a rave about Caleb Odom. And I think he sets himself apart as well. Just his ability to get downfield and make himself a bigger target than he really is as well. And I'm just really a big fan of the kid. And I think we're not done recruiting this kid, and we've come to understand this as well. A lot of these times, if we lose out on high school recruits, that doesn't mean we're done recruiting them. We've seen this with this school, and we've seen this with many other schools, man, that the transfer portal has kind of evolutionized what college football is over the last few years, and it's going to continue doing that. And so don't be surprised if we keep making calls to his phone, because he can really make this offense in the coming years something very must see, honestly. And I think he brings up a bit of confidence that we haven't seen at a tight end position, really since Caden Prescorn has kind of gotten into his groove this season.
Yeah, I mean, Ole Miss will not make him calls to his phone, but there will probably be connections made as well. Really, really good football player. Now, what do you think about the fact that everybody always talks about college players, there's no loyalty and players transfer at a drop of a hat? Then you do something like this. This is why they do that, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and man, we've seen this not just in the college football, but we've seen in the NFL kind of lately too. Matt Zimmer, for the Cowboys. It's supposed to be him being hired. Now it's coming out he hasn't been officially hired, and they're going after Rex Ryan. Even Bill O'Brien was currently supposed to be at Ohio State as their offense coordinator. Now he's the head coach at Boston College. Look, these things have, and when I say these things, guys have been put in these positions many years before the transfer portal became a huge thing in college football. These guys were thinking about leaving because they weren't getting enough playtime, or they weren't having a great relationship with coaches that they thought they were, and they just really didn't have the ability to transfer because they had to sit out a year, or they weren't, granted eligibility years prior to, I would say, the new era of college football, really around 2016, 2017. So these things are not new. It's just becoming a different aspect because they're allowed more freedom, honestly. But you have to think what a player's mindset is when you ask these questions. And like you said, you commit to a program, you commit to a coach, and coaches move around so much in this day. It's hard to say at a school when you really committed to a certain coach, a certain position coach, and just a head coach as well, man, because they are the one that you're spending a lot of your time with. They are the one that you spoke with a lot of your time. They're probably the one that you spent a lot of your campus visits with. So those are the people that you got comfortable with. And when they leave, you kind of feel like you're just on an island by yourself with no one else, and you don't know what to do. And so you have to make the best decision for yourself. And I agree with everything to a certain extent, but you have to understand where these kids are coming from, man. They're trying to do what's best for them. And it can always be taken, appropriately. And sometimes it's not. But we also have to understand that a lot of these times these coaches are doing the same exact thing that these players are kind of doing in this era now. They are doing what's best for them. What can they, do to help provide for their family the best? What can they do to help elevate their career the best as well? And so sometimes you're not going to like what decisions are made, and sometimes we are. That's just the true fact of it is. And it's the honest reality of what we're seeing now. And I just think it's being more focused at this point in time than it has been, say, 10 years ago. And so it's a different dynamic, but I think we're this is not the first time this has happened either, especially in recent years. The coaches are saying they're committed to a place or have been in a place for a short period of time and just leave for a different position or a different, area or system. So I'm not surprised that it happened. It's happened a lot, especially recently, and you will probably continue to see it happen this season, this off season as well. So it is what it is. That's the landscape of the college football world that we're currently in.
Yeah, and if you transfer over to the basketball world, things move a little bit quicker even in that. But Ole Miss has the Kentucky Wildcats tomorrow night in Rupp Arena. I think Ole Miss has won twice in Rupp Arena in its history. It's been a house of horrors for Ole Miss basketball over the years. But this isn't your mom's Kentucky team. Well, I guess technically it could be your mom's Kentucky team. They've lost at Rupp Arena 3 consecutive times for the first time in 50 years.
Yeah.
And that tells me 2 things. One, you're going to get Kentucky's absolute best shot because they have Auburn on the weekend.
Yeah.
And 2, they're gettable.
Yeah. I love both of those points. I really do, because right now they are looking for a win before going into that Auburn game this weekend. And Rupp Arena is one of those places where you can truly submit yourself as a team that's ready for the postseason. And I think we're able to do that this weekend. This weekend, we're able to go into Lexington and win this game, man. And I think it starts with, first of all, we can't beat ourselves up. We have to, commit few turnovers, man. And that's what I'll say first. Take care of the ball and don't let the crowd noise get to us. We have to play our brand of basketball, take smart shots as well. And also, I'll say something. Chris Beard, and when he first got here, I wasn't very appreciative of the way he used his substitutes coming off the bench and the time manners that he had used them at times. But since the beginning of the season, I'd say after the first 5 or 6 games, he has been phenomenal at making the right substitutions, noticing when players need to come in, when they need to come out, maybe a foul situation as well. Who can we put in for a 2-for-1 situation in the last minute of the game type things. He's done really phenomenal since the first couple of games. And I think small things like that are going to help us build. How can we stop one of their guards from, driving to the baseline? Can we do such things like that? And I think his awareness has grown tremendously over the last few months here at Ole Miss. And one thing I will say as well, we have to make free throw shots. I know that, can be overbearing at times, but those are things that help you win games like this. When you get to the opportunity to get to the line, can you, convert on free shots? And if we're able to do that at a high percentage, I think we have a really good chance, man. I think free throw shooting, taking care of the ball, and allowing our coaches to believe in our players and our players to believe in our coaches this week will allow us to come out of Lexington with a really big win.
Thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Daylan Flowers, thank you so much for stopping by, buddy.
Of course, man. Hotty toddy, y'all. Enjoy baseball season as well, folks.
That's right. Go Tigers.